Okay, welcome to the channel on magnetic energy technology principles, applications, and all right, so third time's a charm. So this video is about scalar physics. So highly unconventional information. This is more for the nerds out there that are into physics. Please put down your textbooks and just consider for a minute that the conventional model might not be totally accurate. This etheric magnetic model of the universe, it has some conflicting points even with the scalar physics model. So I just want to warn you. Is the etheric magnetic model, is it possible to determine single values or measurements associated with a single point in the scalar field? And so the interdimensional energy excursion of a scalar field occurs randomly at an extremely high rate, as I talked about many times, while the pulsing and progression of the field create the experience of linear time. So therefore, if you can follow that logic, value averages can be established with pulse matching and analysis provided that the system is not contaminated with unnatural molecular structures, as we'd call them, like pollutants, such as like the pollution currently around our planet and in the magnetosphere. So once that gets cleaned up, then very specific values can be determined, which is highly important for the draw on through this planet and everything. So how do you control electrical, magnetic, and gravitational vector direction and strength in this model? This is a bit interesting because it gets into like practical technology. So the sustainable vector field direction must occur in a vortex pattern in this model. So straight lines simply don't exist, and technology should never seek to create straight lines when harnessing etheric magnetic energy, and which is so often done in the models, all like straight lines. Just forget about straight lines because they're not even anywhere anyway. So the vortex vector, however, it can be expanded and compressed by controlling the attract strength in the field and the excursion pulse rate. If you can follow that, initial etheric excursion reactions automatically generate etheric pulsing, traveling basically at roughly 4 times the speed of what we consider light waves. These pulses elongate into wave-like expressions in new vortex vectors when interconnecting and interacting with polarizing fields. So the electrical vector direction is determined by distribution efficiency and polarized fields. So that's that's basically because it's a byproduct, and I'll get right back into that. Magnetic vectors are governed by the inflow-outflow of a given system. Gravitational vector direction is established and maintained through the interdimensional source point draw and the circuit termination field. Both sides of the circuit rely on pulsing and rotating vortex fields, which is super critical. The strength of the vector field is established by the amount of polarization in the field, with neutral gradation equating to higher strength, meaning that the more neutral the draw is, the greater the force is and the volume of the system, and incidentally the lower the electrical expression. So why does curl in the magnetic vector potential create magnetic lines of force along the axis of rotation? And this is a debated issue in physics, and it has been for a long time. Like, why exactly does that happen? And I think the answer in this model is relatively simple. The center of the curl or vortex in the magnetic vector potential is a relatively neutral void surrounded by a pressure field, which creates the etheric magnetic interdimensional draw that ultimately manifests as a toroidal field with mixed polarities and elemental configurations. The lines of force on the axis of rotation are etheric magnetic inflow-outflow vector fields, so going inflow and outflow in vector fields that contribute to the toroidal field and are part of the interdimensional circuit. The resonance signatures in the magnetic curl vary in every system, and that is so key to understanding the dynamic relationships between the systems. What is actually being contained in the toroidal field, and the resonance signatures in that are so critical to determining the relationship of every toroidal field throughout nature, really, and their interactions with each other. Why is there a gradient to the electrical field resulting from the electric scalar potential? So in this model, when there is an etheric magnetic interdimensional excursion or incursion event, an electrical byproduct or disturbance can manifest, such as lightning. This so-called electrical event diminishes over distance quite easily because it is the result of excess polarized energy that scientists call electrons that dissipate without completing a draw circuit or a redistribution interdimensional path. If these so-called electrons are part of an established circuit with the proper resonance, they will not show gradient decline over distance. Okay, so for example, a properly resonating conductor will not show a voltage drop over distance. The electrical discharge or manifestation of an event is directly related to the etheric magnetic exchange and the molecular structures or elements involved. A neutral magnetic event can create tremendous force and pressure with extremely little electrical byproduct. Now, the total insanity, alert, we're getting into the editorial alert. The total insanity of our so-called modern electrical grids is that we are completely dependent on the dangerous and inefficient byproduct or so-called electrons of countless etheric magnetic reactions inside and around power plants and conductors, while the infinitely powerful and safe core energy of those reactions is completely ignored, at least by conventional science. Now, in top secret labs, they are tapping the inner core of all those reactions, of course, but not at a conventional power plant. Why is there a vertical gradient in the underlying gravitational scalar potential field? The etheric magnetic gravity attract circuit culminates at the center of the toroidal field within the source body, so example like the planet Earth. The concentration of the circuit increases as the field compression narrows. This function is not a product of mass, but a product of an interdimensional draw in the system that can be modified at any point in the circuit. A technological demonstration of this concept is seen in a relatively neutral magnetic energy gravity circuit that has very little mass. So this is like an artificial room. This is like a chamber that is built using magnetic energy neutral draw and a circuit that goes from the ceiling to the floor. There's no mass involved whatsoever, other than just the construction materials. So there's very little mass and there's no rotation necessary for this to produce a gravitational field. But that chamber or that artificial gravity circuit still creates a gravity field equivalent to our planet, or stronger or weaker if desired. Gravity is not a function of mass. I gotta keep saying that. It is a function of the etheric magnetic pressure flow. So that it's just so important, especially when we get into anti-gravity. You've got to understand that, because we're not breaking anything weird that's associated with mass. This is, you can have zero mass and have an extremely strong gravitational field, okay? And you can do that artificially, relatively speaking, zero mass. So, is there a primary potential field that results in the electric scalar potential, the magnetic vector potential, and the gravitational scalar potential? And the unequivocal answer is yes. This source field gives rise to all systems. It is composed predominantly of what we would call neutral magnetic light that is infinitely encoded and moves at a nearly infinite velocity. The energy decelerates upon entry into this so-called physical universe, primarily through vortices, maintaining force and pressure in all systems. Through the attract field, it maintains force and pressure in all systems. It then exhibits, or exits the physical systems, re-enters the non-material plane, and repeats the process over and over and over on its path. The result is a non-degrading, organized, cyclical, and evolutionary system that is eternal in nature. How does the source field manifest into the electric scalar potential, the magnetic vector potential, and the gravitational scalar potential? So the electric scalar potential is a magnetic byproduct that is fully dependent on the molecular structures and the environment in which the reaction takes place. The demand or draw upon the neutral source field determines the polarizations that will manifest, and hence the degree of electrical expression and dissipation in the etheric field. A highly neutral draw will show relatively little electrical phenomena, while a highly polarized draw, such as a typical conductor, will show a high degree of electrical expression. The electric scalar potential is only a function of time, in so much as the pulsed field that we are all immersed in creates a linear separation of events sequentially. It's all dependent upon the pulse field that we are all existing in the physical universe. Time is not a necessary factor for the manifestation of this potential, but a sequential pulse field is necessary. Now, at some point, the math will catch up to this model because removing time from equations is obviously going to highly disrupt the mathematical process. The magnetic vector potential manifests throughout the universe, but its degree of concentration and organization vary among elemental configurations, causing a gradient of magnetic field expressions. The magnetic vector potential is not a function of space. Another thing, so removing space from equations is very problematic, but as we start to get into like pulse fields and the math can change and be modified toward that. The magnetic vector potential is a function of the variations in the source field and the continuous interdimensional exchange in that field. So that's point to point to point to point. The variations in the excursion and incursion from the interdimensional draw from point to point to point is what controls the magnetic vector expression and potential. So that'll be very well mapped and determined and even mathematically expressed. The gravitational scalar potential is a push-pull combination resulting from the compressed etheric magnetic energy in an attract circuit where encoded neutral energy exerts directional influence on energetic structures within its path. The gravitational scalar potential does not depend on space and time, but it depends on the consistency of the source field and the attract pressure it creates, that the source field creates in the physical universe. It's 100% dependent on that, the consistency of that whole system, which can be outside of space and time. That's why you cannot have space and time in the true equations that will be used for like space travel in the gravitational scalar potential. It won't work because it is a process that can be outside of space and time. Understanding the electric scalar potential, the magnetic vector potential, and the gravitational scalar potential from this etheric magnetic model perspective is critical to interstellar and interdimensional travel beyond space and time. So is it possible to have a sustainable connection to the electric scalar potential to supply all of our energy needs, etc., etc.? And the answer from this model's point of view is absolutely not. Harnessing so-called electrons through what is called the electric scalar potential will result in the extinction of surface life on this planet as we know it. There are no free electrons in the source field. I can't say that enough times. There are no free electrons in the source field. The etheric magnetic exchange should never be forced like it is in a typical conventional electrical generation process. Etheric magnetic energy must be attracted from the source field to be sustainable. Creating relatively neutral track fields is a highly efficient and effective way to harness the source field and provide all of our energy needs, really provide all of our needs across the board. That's any type of physical needs or so the end of scarcity as we know it. That's what we are looking at. If we start attracting the source field properly, we can end all scarcity on this planet and clean up the whole planet at the same time. Please continue to send in any questions you have regarding like scalar physics, and for the nerds out there that love this area of study, please send in any questions and I'll try to provide this etheric magnetic model's perspective on those questions and see if we can maybe come to some sort of compromise or resolution, because I know what I'm saying is highly unconventional. It's going to really piss people off, but it's really important that we start to get into this, and other than just at top secret labs where they're working on high-end technology and secret technology, it's time to start entering into the minds of the populace. So thank you for getting through this if you made it this far, and for sending in questions, and I'll see you next time.